Hi guys, it's me George. I apologize for the video quality. I've taken this video like 10,000 times on my phone, and my phone's like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm dying. Just take the fucking video. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. So apologies for picture quality or sound quality. But I wanted to talk about a really, really interesting subject, and it was a conversation today on a folk witchcraft group on Facebook. And I want to start off by saying this is in no way like a read to anybody or anything like that, but the actual conversation and what the person who posted this was talking about, it kind of sparked some really interesting conversation, and I kind of wanted to elaborate on that a little bit more. So the person was talking about a well-known book on folk magic, which in my view is a fantastic book on folk magic. But there was talking about how, um, you know, basically it's kind of the book involves historical kind of accounts of animal sacrifice within folk magic and how that wasn't something that they didn't want to read the book, they didn't want to buy the book because they kind of didn't want to play any part of that. The book is a historical book on folk magic first and foremost, so it's not saying do this now, do this in the present. But it kind of made me kind of want to elaborate a little bit more. So I want to kind of do a disclaimer before I go into this video to say that first and foremost, I am 120% against animal abuse. I do not endorse any form of animal abuse of any kind. I love animals. I feel so connected to animals. I think they're the most beautiful little souls that have walked the planet, and I love them. I wouldn't want to harm a poor defenseless animal, and I wouldn't want to do that in the name of magic. It's not something I am personally prepared to do. Most practitioners as well, most, not all, because I think that's a really unhealthy thing to say. Most practitioners, and I'm talking about 70 to 80% of practitioners that I have met, do not do that and do not partake that within ritual and see that only as historical examples. And that's okay to have historical examples. There is a very big difference between historical examples and actual present practice. So I wanted to give some historical examples of working with animals within folk magic. So if you are sensitive to this, this may not be the video for you, but I think that to deny that within folk magic would kind of basically be denying a huge part because it is prevalent within British folk magic and it does play a part. So first of all, moles. If we talk about British folk magic and moles, I mean, God, there was a belief that to take the live beating heart from a mole whilst it was beating and eating that would basically enable a person with the second sight. It would enable a person with psychic ability. Um, a wallet or a purse made out of moleskin would be a way in order for a person to kind of gather finance. It would be a way that it'd be something that would allow those pennies to keep coming back into that pot. Mole's feet would be used for toothache or also placed within wallets or purses again in order to gather money, in order to gather wealth and prosperity. The foot of a rabbit, lucky rabbit's foot, that's used within folk magic. You know, the belief that that is lucky. Hare's feet, the ankle bone of a hare, was used for cramp. In East Anglia, toads were very, very popular within practice. If we look at folk witchcraft, a way to curse someone would be to literally nail a live toad to the door. Pretty horrific stuff. Toads hung upside down and then put up the chimney, you know, whilst they were alive, would also be deterrence against the evil eye, against maleficia, against evil. And they would, you know, that would be a thing that people would do. In East Anglia, we have the famous toad bone riot. You know, and I'm not going to go into the actual riot. I have done a video on this before as well, so you may just have to watch that. But yeah, you know, there is kind of that prevalence within folk magic. You know, even in pop culture, if we look at the Wicker Man, you know, there is a scene where the a frog is put into someone's mouth in and spat back out as a way to kind of get rid of a sore throat, so that rather than you would get it, it would go to the frog, and the frog would have the sore throat because it's that idea of contagion. Um, Much like rubbing warts with stones and throwing them in a busy crossroads and someone picks that up, that person will get that wart. It's the idea of contagion within folk magic. There has to be a trade for a trade. And that's kind of the idea. And if we look at the word sacrifice, the term sacrifice means to make sacred. It means to elevate something, to elevate a spirit in some way, to elevate a being into a kind of higher, kind of spiritual, kind of to elevate them, basically, to elevate their spirit. And again, that's not me endorsing animal sacrifice. I've said the disclaimer, I've said what I've said, and it's something I do not agree with. But I think if this was something to ignore, you you have to kind of look at history for what it is, and actually sometimes there's acknowledging historical accounts but not necessarily endorsing that. And by reading that book on historical British folk magic, which is a fantastic book, by the way, it's one of my favourite books. I love it. It doesn't necessarily mean we're endorsing that. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to practice that. There are things within British folk magic that we might not want to practice, but we might still practice British folk magic. If it's a personal practice, you say whether or not you want to do it or you don't, because it's your personal practice. It's something that you want to do. I want to talk about it in terms of a kind of modern context and working with animal, if we talk about animal sacrifice. So I was talking earlier about this idea of contagion within folk magic, the idea of kind of there is a trade for a trade. If we look, for instance, historical aspects of things, and I've completely forgot this, and I will go into this kind of trade for a trade, it ties in. If we look, another part of history is saying that witch rings, so for instance, a witch would draw a ring or a circle outside someone's house in order to curse them, in order to lay maleficia, the evil eye, bewitchment, so that the person that would the next person to step in that would die. They would gather the witch's curse and they would be dead. And so what happened a lot, particularly within agricultural and rural farming houses and conditions, is that farmers would take a cock, sorry, such a fucking child, a cockerel or a hen or livestock, and they would throw it into the circle so that that animal would gather up that curse and die rather than a person. That's a really prevalent thing. Another thing is that if someone was close to death's door, a person would be measured with rope. I talk about this in my book, Barbarous Words, by the way. Shameless plug, but doing it anyway. And, basically, an animal would then be made to walk through, thus gathering again the ailment. It's the idea of contagion. So if we talk and we think about those spells in terms of a modern context, again, mentioned in my book, but what other life forms could we use to engage illness, maleficia? Plants. Okay, these two plants I love. Like, don't test me on Miranda Priestley. Like, she's fussy as fucking shit. So I definitely wouldn't be like, have this illness, because I can't even move her without her being like, all my leaves are falling off. They hate being moved. Like, she's so dramatic. Like, I thought I was dramatic and temperamental. Miranda Priestley, damn. Anyway, I've just gone on a spill about Miranda Priestley, my ficus, like fig plant, my fig tree. Anyway, the point is, plants are able to absorb this. They are living things. There is that trade for a trade. That is something that we can look into. Okay, I use that if I do anything like that now. I work with plants. That's something that I do. Consider it a vegetarian thing, you know. And you can talk to the spirit of the plant and say, this is what I am doing, blah blah blah. You can kind of commune with that plant. Please take this ailment, please take this illness. And it's in folk magic. Aspen tree, if someone had a fever, they would they would nail their hair into an aspen tree and say, aspen tree, shake and quiver instead of me, because aspen trees shake. So the idea would be like, you already shake, and I'm shaking and I've got the fever, take this fever. So it's already in folk magic, it's already in folklore. Just because something says what it used to do historically doesn't mean that we should endorse that, and doesn't mean that by practicing British folk magic that we are endorsing that. It doesn't mean that, you know. I work with animal parts, I work with animal remains. So, for instance, I do have a lucky rabbit's foot, and it's a really interesting story. But I found it on in a place that I used to work at quite regularly, which I love. That's another video and another story entirely. But I was told by the spirits that I would have a present, and I found the backs of two rabbits' feet just casually and randomly hanging up on a tree. And I snapped them off and I worked with them, and that is my lucky rabbit's foot. So, you know, it is something that is found. I do harvest animal parts. I do it in a way that is ethical. I do it in a way that that animal is respected. When I find it, I will gather an animal that has died of natural causes. I will not on purposely kill an animal in order to utilize body parts for spell work. But before I gather that animal, I ask its permission. I say a prayer for the spirit of that animal. And when I ask for permission, I look for a sign. I look around nature and I kind of see, I get a feeling. What does my gut tell me? Does it say to me, go ahead, this is good? Or does it say, back off? And if it says back off, I'll back off, and that's absolutely okay. And I think that's absolutely okay to use animal parts in spell work and in charms, you know, and it is found very much in folk magic, providing that it's an ethical way, providing that it's a way that doesn't hurt animals, that doesn't bring harm to animals, you know, because I love animals. I absolutely love them. Even fucking Brown Jenkins, who I discovered lives with me a couple of days ago, little shit, doesn't pay fucking rent or bills. That's my mouse. If you live in Edinburgh, by the way, you have mice. It's like a given. Like all the flats, if they're old flats, they have mice. So like I walked in and Brown Jenkins was like fucking woo on the fucking Christmas tree, and I was like fuck, and jumped off, scared the life out of me. But I wouldn't want to kill him, you know. And that's the point, you know. It's about kind of having it's a little life, you know. The lives, these are lives, and so you know I'm kind of saying that I practice folk magic, and it's not, you know, the killing of animals is not something I endorse. It's not something I do. But historically, it does play a part. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch base on that, and I kind of wanted to talk about that. And I hope the video has been productive. I hope it's kind of helped as well. And in no way, again, was it a read to the person that was kind of posted the comment. Actually, thank you for posting the comment because it's kind of made me think. There was also some really interesting conversations going on as well on that group. So yeah, I believe it's called Folk Witchcraft on Facebook, I think. I don't know. Anyway, over and out. Peace.